What's up, guys? It's the Essential John L. Crossfire.
And I am Nova Lee.
And you guys are tuned into Caught
in Conversation.
Shaka-laka-laka. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 167 of Caught in Conversation. Too much metal. As always, I am your host, the Essential John L. Crossfire, and I am very, very, very excited for this one today. I say every week that I'm excited, but I genuinely am just excited every week, but I'm especially excited for this one because today, as we record this, we have the current, and I guess it's still fresh enough to say, the new NWA Texas Champion, the Guttersnake, Izzy James. I am absolutely stoked that not only did I manage to pull this together, but the fact that we pulled it together so quickly. It's like the Crazy Steve episode all over again. We literally just went, hey, boo, who's this? Boom, and like, that's my impression. Boom, boom. It was all done. Like, it was done. It was done so quick. We had it all set in stone. We worked out the time zones, and it was set in stone and went off without a hitch. Technology hasn't been my friend lately, as you guys heard with the Ethan Hughes episode. It's never been that bad as that episode. Like, I'm so glad I managed to salvage it. But, you know, this is 167 episodes now. Literally, as soon as I called Izzy, the Bluetooth connected. It was all good. It was all great. You know, the neighborhood kids shut up for an hour, surprisingly, to have this conversation. And it was all good. It was all Gucci. But, I really enjoyed this conversation with Izzy. We, much like I say, and I say this a lot as well, cracked record, Crossfire over here. Should put that on a t-shirt on Pro Wrestling Tees. But, you know, cracked record, Crossfire over here. I say it every week, but we barely scratched the surface in this interview here of what Izzy has done in his career and some of his influences and stuff like that. But it's really great insight, I feel, into the mind of Too Much Metal, Unholy, the Guttersnake. You know, call him what you want. He is Izzy James. He is the NWA Texas Champion. But I really learnt a lot talking to Izzy here about his journey and, you know, was marking out with just secondhand with some of the things that he was telling me. And, you know, and a lot of people in wrestling still say that that's a dirty word. But as you know, one of the taglines here of Caught in Conversation, along with our actual tagline of ranting, review, and marking out, but our actual little motto thing that we've added was for the marks, by the marks. And I appreciate Izzy for allowing me to mark out while still having a professional conversation and, you know, casual. It was a casual conversation, but in a professional-ish environment with what I'm trying to do with this podcast here. But no, I just appreciate Izzy for coming on. But before I go any further, the song of the week this week is Holier Than Thou by Corey Taylor. Of course, this is a cover of a classic Metallica song, but absolutely love this song. I thought it was a great little play on words on one of Izzy's old nicknames. Plus, you know, it's a banger of a song. It's metal AF. Really, really enjoy this song, and everyone knows pretty much anything Corey Taylor touches, to me at least, turns to gold. I know he's a very divisive personality with some of the things that he says in interviews and everything else. But no, the song of the week this week is Holier Than Thou, the Corey Taylor cover. The match of the week this week is Barrett Brown versus Gregory James in a dog collar match at Wrestling in the USA. There was a freelance show, a little event called Rumble in the Redwoods 4 on March 25th, 2017. Of course, Gregory James is a former moniker of Izzy. We talk about that in this conversation, how he's evolved as a performer, as a competitor, as a personality, just as a person, really. But Barrett Brown versus Gregory James here in this dog collar match. You can find it on YouTube. Izzy talks about it towards the tail end of this conversation here, so I went and sorted it out and I watched it, and I actually watched another dog collar match between Izzy and ASF as well. But the official match of the week is Barrett Brown versus Gregory James on March 25th, 2017. But with that being said, I'm going to press this button and I'm going to do my best to introduce this man, since our regular ring announcer is still feeling unwell. Ladies and gentlemen, From Houston, Texas, he is the current NWA Texas Champion, the Guttersnake, Izzy James. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am here with the current NWA Texas Champion, the new NWA Texas Champion, Izzy James. I always get flustered when it comes to time zones, Izzy, because it blows my mind that it's currently Wednesday evening for you and it's Thursday morning for me. But how are you doing as I talk to you tonight?
I'm not too bad. I'm just kind of, in a way, I'm still recovering and still trying to make sense of all this new NWA Texas title stuff, but I'm not having a bad night.
Hell yeah, that's what we love to hear. Now, the first question here is always the same for first-time guests, and it's kind of a softball question, but I think it's always a great icebreaker, and that's simply put for you, what was your earliest professional wrestling memory?
My earliest professional wrestling memory, I would actually have to say, is very, very young. My mom and my grandmother would take me to the sportatorium where WCCW, the World Class Championship Wrestling, was all the time. And I can remember there was one moment where I was a kid. My mom said that we were going to Dallas to go shopping, and while we were on the way there, I saw the sportatorium in the distance, and I said something about it. And so instead of going shopping, my mom pulled off and got us tickets to go watch the wrestling show that night. And I remember walking in into this dingy little warehouse kind of thing, and I remember walking into the arena area where you can see down in the ring from the seats, and I can see the smoke trailing through the lights. I can see Jeff Jarrett in the ring cutting a promo. That I want to say I was 3 years old, maybe.
Wow. Okay.
4 years old. I was a very small kid, very like an infant, but I distinctly remember those details.
Well, what a memory! Like, not only is it the iconic sportatorium, it's just a spontaneous trip to the sportatorium. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Were you hooked from that moment on?
I was hooked from the moment I was born, honestly. Like, what my grandmother tells me is when, my grandmother and my mom would tell me is, even when my mom was pregnant with me, she would go to the sportatorium and still watch the shows. So, I've been around wrestling since I was a kid, since I was born pretty much. And, I think I was hooked from, the moment it was in front of my eyes, but that moment right there, that's the one that I would stake claim is what set the path forward.
So from that, obviously WCCW then was your bread and butter. At what point did you discover that there was wrestling outside of that?
So I was, I watched, even though I went to the sportatorium and stuff, I watched WCW. Saturday mornings all the time. I watched WWF every Monday Night Raw that was coming on. I watched it. Even Superstars, Saturday night's main event. If there was wrestling going on, we were watching it in my house. The only thing we really couldn't afford were pay-per-views, so my mom would take me to a friend's house and we'd watch pay-per-views over at her friend's house. I think the first one I really remember watching was WrestleMania 9.
Okay. It's fondly remembered for some good things, some bad things, but you know what? That's an iconic visual, middle of Caesar's Palace. They're all in togas for whatever reason.
Yeah. A lot of people hate on WrestleMania 9, but I got a special love for it.
Honestly, though, people obviously they go straight to Taker versus Gonzalez and stuff like that, but the undercard with some of the tag matches and stuff were pretty solid matches, if I'm being honest.
Oh, absolutely.
So, from what then point did you then discover I guess, local territory wrestling existed, like outside of, you know, the sportatorium?
So it was about mid '90s, early in the '90s, '94-ish. I think we just kind of stopped going to the sportatorium. It was getting shut down. It was, you know, a lot of stuff was going on through it, and I remember about that time frame, it was pretty much just watching wrestling on TV from that point forward, since we really didn't know of any other places around the local area to go watch wrestling, because that was pretty much it, you know. And then I remember I was about 13 years old, and I discovered there was a local wrestling company called PCW. What was it called? Professional Championship Wrestling, I think is what it was. Anyways, it had stars like the early days of Lance Archer, Tim Storm, AJ Styles works there a few times. I got to see Sabu. Yeah, I got to see Sabu in person one night, front row for that. So I was up 13, which would put me about 2000 something. I was born in '88, so like 2001, 2002. So I was, you know, I would go back to those shows. But it wasn't until I got into the wrestling business that I discovered, oh, there was all this going on. There was this show, that show, this show, that show, all over the place. That's when my horizons really started to broaden.
See, that just makes me jealous because, like, obviously here in Australia we have a very thriving scene now, but in the, you know, those early 2000s, like, you know, the local guys were hot, but we didn't get to see those names that you just mentioned, you know, unless it was once every however many years. So I'm a little bit jealous of that, you know, especially, you know, Sabu and AJ and stuff like that. But I'm just trying to do the math here. I think that means you're 6 years older than me. I thought we were actually a bit closer in age than that, but that's still, you know, roughly the same generation. But obviously, as you said, you were pretty much hooked from the get-go. But what was actually the deciding factor that made you kind of go, hey man, I want to do this? And how did you take that step?
I think it was WrestleMania 12, and a lot of people say this match is the reason they got into professional wrestling, and it was definitely mine. The match that made me want to be a professional wrestler was Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart, WrestleMania 12.
Man, hell yes. Dude, I'd hate to think how many times I've watched that match.
Yeah, that was the first time I had ever seen anything like that, as far as like two wrestlers going in there for an hour plus, and, you know, and going the distance. Whereas before, you know, you're catered to watching, you know, this is the golden era of WWF, so everything's, you know, 5 to 10 minutes maybe, and so now you're getting to see these guys be like true performers and true athletes and test their will. It was. I remember that pay-per-view was that was the one for me where I was like, this is I think this is what I want to do. And I didn't grow up big into comic books. I didn't watch X-Men. I didn't watch Batman. I didn't watch any stuff like that. I watched pro wrestling. That was literally the only thing I watched. Maybe some Ninja Turtles every now and then, but it was always pro wrestling on in my house.
I love that. I love that so much. I'm into like pretty much everything else you just mentioned, but if there was wrestling involved, it would always take like priority over it.
Right.
So if my math is correct, you've been in the business for 14, 15 years now, yeah?
15, yes.
15 years, yeah. I'm such a professional host. I wrote the notes down and I can't even read my own damn handwriting. This will jump forward a little bit, just, you know, trying to, you know, try and wrap it up in a bow as much as we can while being respectful of your time. But over the course of your career, you've had a handful of different ring names and they've all still kind of tied in and been similar in some way or another. But how do you really go about nailing down a name? And is there anything specifically different about Izzy James as a performer or competitor compared to any of the other names that you've used previously?
So I have had a few names throughout my career. I feel like Izzy is the truest form of who I am as a person. They say the best characters are just you turned up to 11. And I would have to say that Izzy has allowed me to find confidence and find a comfortability in the ring that I just didn't have before. Before I was in the wrestling industry, I was in the music industry. And so I toured with bands, and I was a front man for several metal bands in the Dallas, Texas area.
Okay.
And while I had stage presence, I still kind of lacked confidence. But anything that I've done as far as all my characters, all my different names, they've all kind of had some sort of music tied to them. The characters like Too Much Metal, clearly that's, the hand symbol, but when you do just the two pinkies on both hands, so that's music related. Then Unholy was one of the next characters that I did, and that's based on my favorite song by Kiss, which is Unholy. And then this current version, Izzy James, goes by the Guttersnake, which is a song by a rapper named Honey Claus, and it's the song is titled Guttersnake, but the character and the vibe of what Izzy is a gutter punk from the streets of Houston. I grew up in Dallas, kind of getting in fights all the time. A back alley kid. If I was leaving a concert, I was probably in the back alley doing something I probably wasn't supposed to be doing. But but that was kind of the my upbringing, and I just kind of leaned into it.
You actually kind of just answered the follow-up question as well. So that was awesome. Segue by accident. Literally, but the actual question I wrote down was, your personality is very punk rock, very rock and roll. What does the Guttersnake mean? And you literally just answered that, kind of segueing from that. So that's awesome. In your career, you've made appearances on every major promotion in the US in some form or fashion, and you've competed for quite a nice little chunk of independent wrestling promotions and territory promotions, especially very well known, obviously, in the Texas area. Go figure, now that you are the NWA Texas champion. But is there any difference for you in the way that you perform when you're out there for, say, a Reality of Wrestling or even an NWA, as opposed to what you'd call, maybe for lack of a better term, a regular indie show?
There's certain things that that are instilled in you when you go to do things like Reality of Wrestling or even New Texas, because we focus a lot on TV style as far as like making sure you're giving all your facials to the cameras. Your positioning is certain place in certain ways so that all the camera angles get a shot. But as far as like what I put forth into a match, I'm always going to give 110, 150, 200%. Go out there, leave it all on the line, blood, sweat, and tears. I'm going to try and perform at the best of my abilities, whether that be, this crowd is more super indie show, or this crowd is more small town. They like the old school kind of WCW Saturday morning wrestling. You have to like, and I've been doing this for a long time, so I've gotten to the point where I know most of the crowds based on the town I'm in, or I'll watch the first match and assess how these fans react and don't react to certain things.
Okay, hell yeah. So with that, you've done a lot of like extra work and stuff for both WWE and AEW. What's the mindset behind that? Because on one hand, like, it's a great opportunity and it's a foot in the door, but on the other, you probably know in your heart that you have a lot more to offer than the couple of minutes you've gotten to basically make people look strong. So was there a certain different approach to that when you're doing extra work as opposed to doing a regular show?
Absolutely. I've seen it before where guys have an issue, wrestling for a minute and a half, 2 minutes to make, whoever is the TV star look good. But for me, it's, I'm there to do a job. If you need me to be a cameraman, I'll be a cameraman. You need me to be a doctor, I'll be a doctor. You need me to, you need me to go out there and make so-and-so look good, just, get beat up for however long. Hey, you're paying me. So I have a motto, and it's, I have it written on my pricing sheet at my merch table. It says, pin me, pay me, give me pizza.
I love that so much. It's like a little Job Squad motto with a little twist. I appreciate that. We have a wrestler here in Australia called Apex Anderson, and his motto is TKOs and tacos, but he also says basically, like, watch me wrestle, bring me tacos.
Very good. I love it.
Now, as we've mentioned a couple times here, you very recently come off the back of the 8-man tournament to crown the brand new NWA Texas champion. So once again, I'll congratulate you for that. But I'm sure this, as you're aware, this championship has a fairly extensive lineage. It's gone through multiple different eras and generations. It's had, a hiatus or two here and there where it's become defunct a few times, and, different designs and, different companies and territories have represented it at time. But it is now officially back in the hands of the NWA themselves, along with their officially, affiliated partner territories. So how much pressure is on you knowing that you are the first champion of this era or generation, for lack of a better term?
I certainly feel the pressure. I think I'm putting more pressure on myself than I feel maybe coming from NWA itself. But that's just me. I'm going to be my biggest critic no matter what. Anytime I'm watching my footage back, the first thing I'm doing is dogging on something I did. For me, the NWA Texas Championship is I feel like the culmination of 15 years of hard work. And, if there was anything that I wanted to do before I left, Texas or left the country to, pursue life elsewhere, I was going to make sure that I left a legacy and left my name in the history books of Texas wrestling. And I think I finally did that. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure to not necessarily to hold up my end of the bargain as far as my wrestling goes, because I know what I can do in the ring. It's that ability to go out there and prove to myself what I say I am. And my motto or my character, he's the Guttersnake, but he believes that he is the best wrestler in Texas. And I feel like in order to prove that, I have to be better than myself every time I go out there.
Okay. So you're basically competing against yourself, but in a healthy way.
Yeah. I certainly go through a lot of internal battles, but that's one that I think is a healthy one.
So this is kind of a softball question here, but just for kind of context, how did you find out that you were going to be in that tournament, and obviously then eventually reacting to becoming champion?
So it was honestly the month before we did the tournament. There was a show. There was a Dog Pound Championship Wrestling show, and Joe Galley, who's one of the NWA representatives, he was at the show. And Dog Pound Championship Wrestling is a part of the NWA Texas territory system. It's ran by Jazz and Rodney Mack, and Jazz and Rodney have known me my entire career. They have seen me from the time I was a skinny little kid trying to figure out his way in wrestling to where I'm at now. And the show before the actual tournament, they announced that there was going to be the tournament. And and that night I learned right then and there I was going to be in the tournament. I was like, oh, I guess I'm in the tournament. I'll see you guys next show. It wasn't like, oh, there's going to be a tournament 6 months from now. Get ready, guys. It was like, you got a month to prepare.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. No pressure at all.
Here's a little fun one before we get to the next question. We're all about fantasy booking here on the Court and Conversation podcast. We say it's for the marks, by the marks. If anyone else other than you had have won that championship, who would have it been?
If I was to have guessed anybody to have won that championship in that tournament, I was going to say either Bam Bam Malone was my first ballot, or Frank Stone, who is the current Dog Pound Championship Wrestling heavyweight champion. But both of those two dudes are, just studs, and look like $1 million, and you could definitely build a company around those guys. So Bam Bam was number one. Frank Stone was number two, and for me, I was like, maybe I'm in that category of like top three or whoever. But you never know what's going to happen for you. And I've had a history of luck where it's like, I think this is going to happen. And then all of a sudden, somewhere along the way, something swerves, and I'm picking up dirt.
The thing I loved the most about that answer was, though, you didn't even hesitate when I asked you, and I love to hear wrestlers putting over other wrestlers and putting the ego aside. So that's awesome to hear that you straight away went, boom, these guys deserve their flowers. I love to hear that. Are there any specific goals that you have in mind in terms of the presentation for this championship compared to the other titles in the NWA and its territories, or even just other championships in wrestling in general?
I definitely want to take it elsewhere, not just Texas. I want to defend it in different territories on NWA Power. It's all dependent on what they see as far as these territory championships go, as far as Billy and the brass at NWA, what they want for it. But I want to treat it as though it's a workhorse title. Like, you want to come to Texas, you want to be the Texas heavyweight champion. Like, this is a title you're going to have to work for it, because it took me 15 years to earn something like this. I'm not just going to give it up without a fight. And if there's anything, I want it to be the championship that is just it's fought for tooth and nail, blood, sweat, and guts.
See, I don't want a fantasy book more than I already do, but there is at least like 20 to 30 guys here in Australia that I'd like to see you, tear it up for that championship with. I'm just saying, if someone wants to put that out there. But as we start to kind of, we're almost at the half an hour mark, and as I said, I want to try and be as respectful as your time as I can, but we're not going to be able to fit your entire career into one podcast interview here. But as you said, you're 15 years into the journey now. Has it lived up to everything you envisioned to, and is there anything that you'd do differently?
It's been a wild ride, and there's been a lot of times where you're not sure if what you've done for however long has been worth it. If you're ever going to see the fruits of your labor, there's certainly been a lot of times where I questioned whether or not I was going to continue, even up to last year. Up until about this time last year, I was pretty certain that I was going to retire at the end of 2024. If there was something I would have done differently, it would have been to have taken some chances that I should have taken in my early career. I had opportunities to move across the country, to move to Philly, to move to New Jersey, to pursue different work in different places. But for some reason, I just I stayed in Texas. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was lack of finances, whatever the case may be. Those choices were made, and I live with them. But I feel as though me staying in Texas led to winning a championship that was honestly a full circle moment for not just my wrestling career, but for my life, with me seeing the NWA and WCCW at the Sportatorium as an infant. So if there was anything that I would have done, it would have been to have taken some chances earlier on. But I feel happy with where things have gone.
Yeah, before I get to the last couple of questions, is there any chance that we will see Izzy James in Australia anytime soon?
I certainly hope so. I know the Natural Classics. I've wrestled the Natural Classics before. Tom and Phillips, the twins.
Phenomenal tag team.
Yeah, beautiful work, both of those guys. I wrestled them back in, I think it was like 2019. It's been a long time since I wrestled them, but I would love to come out there, and so I'm going to reach out to them. WSW out there is one I'd like to go, cut my teeth in. My friend Barrett Brown was just over in Australia. I can't remember what companies he worked for, but he was just recently over there as well. So yeah, I'm actually talking with like Japan, and I reached out to China and Korea. So I'm trying to branch out to new places, and Australia is certainly on that list.
And could you imagine defending the NWA Texas Championship in Korea? that would be wild. Absolutely wild.
Be a Texas title, then it would be the world Texas title.
I mean, everything's bigger in Texas, so maybe Texas is the world. I don't know.
Hey,
but
there's certainly, you could put several states in our state.
That is very true. This is the part of the show where we kind of start to just mark out and have fun a little bit. A lot of people say that it's a bad word, but I strongly disagree. But you don't have to just answer with one, because it's a very loaded question. But what are some of your favorite matches that you've had personally, and then that you've just seen, whether that's live or television, anything like that?
Oh my goodness! I've had so many matches. I've had matches, so many matches that I've lost count, or I've lost. You get hit in the head a lot with a lot of concussions. So I've probably forgotten more matches than I can remember. But there's been some very fond memories that I've been able to have. Even though it was like 90 seconds, my match with Dustin Rhodes on AEW Collision is going to have to be one of my top moments. Match-wise, it wasn't anything other than throw him against the ropes, take a crossroads. It wasn't much of anything, but it's one of those moments. Like I said, I have a photo of my mom with Dustin Rhodes at the Sportatorium, and so to be able to wrestle him on national television in the state of Texas, it was such a beautiful moment for myself. So that one I hold very close to my heart. Other matches, like I did a really great casket match with Epidemius Jr. Yeah, it was me and Epidemius Jr. last year. We had a string of like 4 matches, and each one just got better and better and better, and it culminated in a casket match, which I think the footage may have been lost from that show for whatever reason, which really upsets me. But that's been kind of the plight of Texas wrestling, is some of these places, they end up losing their footage.
Happens a lot here in Australia, trust me. There's stuff from like 30 years ago that just doesn't exist anymore, and it's an absolute shame.
Yeah. Some other ones, oh man. One of the first matches I ever had, like with a name, was Paul London.
Okay.
I've wrestled him like 3 or 4 times, so it would have to be probably the night that him and I were in San Antonio, and we were doing like a one-upsman kind of thing, and he ended up doing a moonsault off the second rope, and his feet went through the ceiling and brought the ceiling down, so that was fun.
Holy shit.
So those 2, if I had one more to guess, probably, God, there's so many good ones. Possibly my dog collar match with Barrett Brown in California. That one was real fun. That one can be found, I believe it's on Barrett Brown's YouTube page. But that one was really fun to put together, and the crowd was just so hot for the whole thing. So those 3, I think, would be some of my favorites. And then like matches I've seen in person. I'd have to say Brian Keith versus Luke Jacobs this past WrestleMania weekend at New Texas Pro. There was very little people there as far as crowd goes because it was like 11 o'clock midnight kind of show, but it was just one of the best matches I had ever seen as far as two technical wrestlers going in there and pacing themselves in such a beautiful way. Also, trying to think. Daniel Bryan versus Randy Orton versus Batista at WrestleMania 30. I say that because it was the only WrestleMania I've been to, and it was with my mom, who I was very close with before she, up until she passed away. But it was very special for me because I paid for those WrestleMania tickets for myself and my mom to go. And so
a full circle kind of thing there. That's really nice.
Yeah. So those would be some. I'm trying to think if there's like another one. I'd have to like really sit and think about it. Ooh, here's a good one. And I'm biased because he's like my younger brother, Barrett Brown versus Minoru Suzuki in Dallas. Yeah, that one's an amazing match. Again, a biased moment for me, but those. I mean, we're talking about my picks here, so
I love that.
That's my last one.
I'm also kind of like jealous though, because like not even just matches, but you mentioned Mania 30, that iconic Rock Austin Hogan thing to kick off the show. Like I don't know how many times I've gone back and watched just that segment by itself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I was a big Ultimate Warrior fan growing up when I was a kid. I was all about the Ultimate Warrior, and so him doing his Hall of Fame there, and then literally the next night cuts that eerie promo, and then the next day he's passed away, and so like very strange time, but I hold it close to my heart.
Without going on too much of a tangent then, because I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone else that was in the building when it happened, how did you feel when the streak ended?
It was certainly a weird moment. It's like when you feel so many feelings all at once that you stop feeling things. Like you just kind of go numb. Like it didn't feel real. Like it honestly, like I felt the room. I never felt a bigger place with more people in it get so deflated. And there was like an awkward silence where people, everyone, myself included, didn't know. Like, was that like supposed to have happened? Like that doesn't seem right. Why does this feel weird? And then the graphic popped up, and I work in production as well, and so it's like, oh, that was prepared and ready. So like something just changed. I think history was just made, and it's one of the, like I was like it's very weird to be in moments in your life where you think you're 10 years later, you go, oh man, I was a part of history that night. That's going to be written about in books. That's going to be in DVDs. That's going to be they're going to make documentaries about that night, So it is very cool moment, but also very strange. But it was, like I said, it's an unforgettable moment and a shift in how wrestling was perceived and how wrestling, who was the top people in wrestling at that time. It certainly shifted that night.
Absolutely. Really quick though, what kind of stuff do you do in terms of like the production?
So I have an associate's degree in film production. So I work cool. I work as a video editor and cinematographer. I do work behind the camera, but I think my bread and butter is behind the computer doing edits. I make short films. highlight reels, different things for wrestlers, cinematic promos, stuff like that.
Hell yeah, I love that shit. So I'm very amateur, and I'm also legally blind, but I've started making I say started, it's been 3 years now, which is crazy, it's been that long, but I do like posters and 8x10s and stuff like that, but the video stuff, that's a whole other animal. I've done like a couple of like entrance videos and stuff here and there, but as far as the full-blown like show editing and highlight reels, I've got a few buddies that do that. That's way above my pay grade. That's too much effort for me. So I commend that. This next one is kind of open for interpretation. You can either answer it realistically in terms of goals, or you can just completely fantasy book to your heart's content. But before we get to the last question, who is your ultimate dream opponent, and what is the dream stipulation?
My ultimate dream opponent. Oh my goodness. Man, it's a toss up. Are we talking like active current wrestlers or like of all time?
That's why I say open for interpretation. You can be as wild with it as you like, or you can narrow it down as a realistic goal.
If I was being completely selfish and wanted to fantasy book with anybody, I would want to be in there with Shawn Michaels in an Iron Man match, just to be able to, to say that I was able to go in there and have that kind of match with like the guy who was my favorite wrestler growing up, and like in that type of match that made me want to be a pro wrestler, So that would probably be my ultimate fantasy. But if we're trying to go like a little realistic, it's a toss up between John Cena and Randy Orton. Okay. Those two, like when John Cena first came on the scene, I hated John Cena. I absolutely hated John Cena. It wasn't until like 2017, 2018 that I was like, all right, I'm starting to something about this guy I'm starting to like. And Randy Orton is just like, I feel like Randy Orton's going to go down in history as one of those, like people say John Cena is the greatest of all time, but I think Randy Orton is the greatest of all time, if not second in line to that, just because he's been so consistent for so long and evolved in so many different ways, not only as a person but as a performer, and his work rate just speaks for itself. So one of those two, if we're talking about people that are still wrestling today, if I could have any kind of match with those guys, it's going to be a big money match, and so I'm going to make a big paycheck that day.
Well, I mean, Tommy Invincible's pushing really hard. He wants John Cena at SummerSlam, so maybe you do Izzy James versus Tommy Invincible, and the winner faces John Cena.
Hey. John wants to be an 18-time champion. He can come for this Texas Championship.
After you've defended it in Korea to make it a world title.
Hey, that's right.
Before we get to the plugs and everything else, we always end on a non-wrestling question. We try and do just like a little fun fact. And we try our best to tailor it to our individual. And obviously you yourself, you're the Guttersnake, Too Much Metal, etc. So on your playlist, who is your guilty pleasure band or artist?
I got a few, but I would have to say I'm going to go with the one that tends to make my wife, my partner, cringe every time I play Creed. Anytime I play Creed or anytime I play Limp Bizkit, she just slow turns in the car. She just gives me that slow turn while I'm driving, and I can feel her eyes just piercing through my skin. But if you're gonna throw on One Last Breath or Sacrifice or My Own Prison by Creed, I'm gonna be the drunk white girl at karaoke singing that.
I love that so much. I'm actually a big Creed fan myself, but there's still that part of me that like there's that clip of JR and it's like, now for the 1000th time, Creed, we want you to cry.
Yeah.
I love that so much. But with that being said, we actually, I don't know what areas, but I actually have a handful of people that listen across the US. So with that being said, where can we find you in the next coming, week to month? This is coming out publicly on Sunday, June 15th. So where can we find Izzy Shaw coming up? Where can we find you on socials? And do you have any merch?
Yeah, so on socials, you can find me at Instagram, Twitter/X, and YouTube at Izzy James _PW. I'm on Pro Wrestling Tees as well. You just type in Izzy James. You can find my shirts. I'm about to redo my entire stock. I have new merchandise that I'm putting out. Some stickers, some shirts, some photos. I'm trying to get some hats and other things like that. Currently, you can find me on the 21st of June. I will be at NWA Texas's Texas Style Wrestling. On the 27th of June, I will be in New Orleans for Wildcat Wrestling's X-Rated show, which is like a adult-only show. And
is that the one where you're facing Luke Hawk?
That one just happened.
Oh, just happened. Okay.
Yeah, that just happened this past weekend. I don't know who I'm wrestling at the X-Rated show, but possibly a rematch with Luke Hawk, which would be fantastic. After that, in July, I'll be in Arkansas for Diamond State Wrestling. I'll be at New Texas Pro for Texas Contender Series, at the Indie Showcase. We do an independent showcase every summer, so July 27th I'll be there as well. And then at some point, I haven't got the dates yet, but I will be in Puerto Rico.
Oh, nice.
For a show. And in September, I will be making my way to Japan. So I'll be there for about 2 weeks in Fukuoka, Japan, possibly Tokyo and Okinawa.
Dude, this dude's all over the place. I love that.
Yeah,
I love that so much. Is that like before we wrap up? Like, is that wild for you that obviously like wrestling is all about the grind, and no one's really an overnight success. But is that wild to you that after 15 years you're now, arguably the busiest you've ever been?
It is, because I feel like early in my career, I remember there was a time period where people were really hot and were really really pushing me as far as like the Texas scene goes. There was a lot of push behind me to go and do other things, and I got to work on and off with Ring of Honor for a few times. Did one of their pay-per-views. I did, I did other stuff with AEW and WWE, but there was never like a time where I was fully just, this is all I do. And in the last year, maybe year and a half, I've created, a sustainable working career to where I'm booked all the time. 3-4 times a week I'm wrestling, making enough money to, pay all my bills. But I like, there's always that desire to want more, to do more, to go and travel more places. So it is wild for me to be 15 years in and just now finally getting these opportunities to go to Japan and go to different countries. I've been to some others in the past, but Japan has always been a goal of mine since I started. And for whatever reason, those things just didn't pan out. A lot of the times it was, unread emails, but I'm more than grateful for the opportunities that are about to come my way.
Hell yeah. I love that. But with that, I do appreciate you for jumping on here tonight and giving, us a somewhat still, lesser known podcast a chance. And I've really appreciated this chat and this conversation. And hopefully I can talk to you again at some point down the line. But I wish you the best of luck with your current bookings in Japan and Puerto Rico. And hopefully sooner than later you can come out here in Australia, whether that's WSW or elsewhere. I know that there's a lot of promotions in Melbourne that like bringing in international talent. They're actually got Brian Kendrick coming out in the next month or so. So who knows? Maybe Izzy James could be on the horizon. But I appreciate you for coming on, and thank you very much. And is there anything else you'd like to plug before we wrap this up?
Hey, thank you for this time to just sit and talk and get to know me and get to know you. It's been a pleasure. I'd actually love to come to Australia as soon as I can. I will be out there. In the meantime, just if you're not already doing it, follow my Instagram at Izzy James _PW. You can find wrestling content. You can find a segment that I like to do called Sick Songs, where we talk to different wrestlers about music, things they're listening to, because what transcends all time and space? Music. Everyone loves it.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you very much, Izzy, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, which again is still weird for me given that it's now like 11 a.m. on Thursday. But thank you very much, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. You have a good night or day.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, that was the Guttersnake, Izzy James, current NWA Texas champion, as we record this conversation once again for the 13th, millionth, bajillionth, billionth. I'm still reeling after rewatching all three Austin Powers movies recently for the billionth time. Thank you, Izzy, for coming on and giving this, still relatively small time podcast, the time of day, and I just really appreciate it. As we record this episode here, my goal for this year was to hit 4.5k downloads all time. As I record this conversation on Thursday, the 5th of June, I guess it was technically Wednesday, the 4th of June for Izzy because of time zones. But as I record this conversation, we are at 4.1k downloads. So, just on, the start of the 6-month period. So, might as well say halfway through the year, and we're really close to hitting that goal, and I really hope we can go beyond and hit 5k by the end of the year. But I'm just trying to be realistic, and I don't want to overshoot, so to speak. But yeah, I just really appreciate Izzy for coming on, and every single week I say it, and then every single week I make jokes about it, and I sound like a crack record, but I just am genuinely appreciative of every guest that we have here on Court in Conversation, and allow me to do this and just, have a distraction for an hour or two. Of course, all, Izzy's links will be below as well. I'm such a great host, I can't even think of the words. What are words? Buy the t-shirt. I haven't thrown that out for a few weeks, of course, on the Pro Wrestling Tee Store. If you check my link tree, everything's there, plus the Pro Wrestling Tees and the Amazon wishlist and the GoFundMe and yada, yada, yada. The list goes on. Nova's link tree will still be there as well. But if you go to Izzy's link tree, it has like his Instagram, his Pro Wrestling Tees as well. Obviously go support him. I think Blue Sky. I think he's got Teespring as well off the top of my head. And then I've also linked his X account and his YouTube accounts as well, which aren't a part of his link tree. Literally just today, as we're recording this, something happened to his Facebook page. So keep an eye out for him on Facebook as well, in hoping that it comes back. But it's not linked below for that reason currently. But yeah, it's all there. Everything's there. Of course, the Patreon. If you're a Patreon subscriber, you actually get this episode specifically a week and a half in advance. But usually with the Patreon episodes, early access, you get at least 2 days. I try my best to do 3 to 4 days. But yeah, this one, we managed to get a couple of episodes in the can in the space of just over 12 hours. As I record this, you're not going to hear this until next week if you listen to it on the free platforms. But as I record this, I literally just interviewed Blake Johnson, Mr. Big, last night, which will be last week's episode at this point. But of course, if you're a Patreon subscriber for as low as $5 dues or $2.40 US or whatever it is thereabouts, you'll get this episode a full week and a half in advance, literally the same time you get the Blake episode before even it goes free publicly on the Sunday. But just a little cheap plug there. Of course, $10 will get you, $10 Australian, $6 US, immediate access to my first children's book on the Patreon. It is a pin post. The tier 3, which is $15 Australian, gets access to the video footage of our watch-alongs. You get the option to actually pick a topic for our podcast, whether that be a Markapalooza or a watch-along or a review or anything like that, maybe even be part of one of our Markapalooza episodes, of course, the top tier, the Supernova tier. I obviously can't do it as high-pitched and as sassy as Nova Lee, but without her here, that's what you got to deal with. You will be getting anything and everything that's listed on the Patreon, plus you'll be getting shout-outs for the intros and outros as long as you are a subscriber. We don't have a top-tier one just yet. We've got a couple of smaller tier ones, which we appreciate, but the top-tier ones, if we get enough of those, we'll be doing Patreon-exclusive giveaways of some of the wrestling merch that we're trying to clutter, both to pay bills and both just to declutter in general and stop being so materialistic in some cases. But yeah, that's all there. It's all there, but especially check out Izzy's links. I'm going to leave that in. Slip of the tongue, my bad, ADHD. Check out Izzy's links. Again, what are words? Go follow him. And of course, we have 14, 15 different countries that listen to this podcast, and about 7 or 8 of them are semi-regularly, and one of them is the US. I don't know what area of the US you guys are in, but if you have the means to get to TSW, Texas Style Wrestling's live TV tapings on Saturday, June 21st, the link for that will be in the description below. And if you have the means to get to New Orleans, Louisiana, you can go to Wildcat Sports Entertainment, WKS, X-rated number 9 on Friday, June 27th. The link to that will be below. And of course, Izzy did say that, he basically gave us a list of what he was doing from now up until, I think he said September, off the top of my head now, from just having the conversation. But I'll just link those two because they're in this month. So that's going to be awesome. Check those out. But yeah, just thank you so much to Izzy again for coming on, of course. On the Australian front of things for events, July 11th, 12th, 13th, MXW are on tour with former WWE superstar Brian Kendrick in Geelong, Ballarat and Horsham. And as I said on last week's episode, I'm going to say it again, the 13th, July 13th show, the Sunday, is what really tickles my fancy because they have Web Wars, which for lack of a better term, is similar to when WWE were doing Taboo Tuesday and Cyber Sunday, and I think they did the Raw voting for a while as well. But if you follow MXW on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff, you can decide the fate of these matches. And rather than post all the links, I have just linked, and it's a link to the Facebook post, so you can click on the page and like it and everything from there. But if you click the link that I put below, it is a Facebook post where they have outlined and detailed all 3 events separately in the one post. So whichever one's closest to you or whichever one you're available for or whatever else, you can click that post and then, buy some tickets from there. But that link to that post is there for all the details on the July 11th, 12th, 13th shows featuring Brian Kendrick. July 19th, Saturday, July 19th, Extreme Capital Wrestling will have their 4th show, Guilty Verdict. Unfortunately, Nova and I will be missing this show. We've been at the previous 3, all 3 of them. We're unfortunately missing this one, but there's a huge main event, a fatal 4-way match. 1 fall to a finish, very appropriate, fatal 4-way for show 4. Jackson Thornhill defends his newly won Extreme Capital Wrestling Heavyweight Championship against former champion Jake Gibson, number 1 contender Ace Shack, who unfortunately missed the last show and didn't get his shot, and Zack Stryker. It was meant to be Doomslayer. He's unfortunately had to pull out due to personal reasons, and now Zack Stryker, who Jackson Thornhill is technically still tag team champions with in ICW. Of course, last ECW show, Jackson Thornhill pile drove Zack Stryker, tried to break his own tag team partner's neck in the means to get towards, having that ECW Cup, which he then cashed in that same night to take the title. So there's a lot of things at stake here. Dad Squad, inaugural ECW Tag Team Champions at the last show, now have to defend in a Tag Team Turmoil match, a Tag Team Gauntlet match. They're entering first. They have to run the gauntlet in their very first offense. So both champions on both sides of things. Very vast contrast of reactions too, obviously. Fans were very happy for the Dad Squad winning the tag titles, weren't happy with Jackson Thornhill winning the heavyweight title. But both set of champions in the same predicament here, having to go through anyone and everyone to retain those titles in their very first defenses. So lots of stake. And then, of course, at the end of the year, October 11th, we have the Emma Butler Memorial Show. I've spoken at length about this and what it means to me. Obviously, as I'm recording this, there's about 40-ish tickets remaining. In the week it takes for this episode to come out, there could be less. But all, $1 from every ticket, plus all of the raffle proceeds, and then 10% of the ICW Central West merch and High Octane merch and everything else goes towards the charity. I still have 15 Radiation Kick shirts available. 4 medium, 4 large, 7 extra large. You can pre-order them to pick them up at the show, $30 a shirt. $10 from each shirt goes to the charity. So if we sell all 15 of those shirts, that's another $150 that I've raised on top of the other money that I've raised from the previous shirts, and then the 20% of my merch that I sold at the previous show. And then I'll be doing it again here. 20% of all merch that I sell in general will go towards the charity and everything. So yeah, you can pre-order them to pick it up at the show for an extra $10. I can post it to you if you're in Australia. But yeah. Tickets to the Emma Butler Memorial Show in the link below. Let's keep raising money. Let's keep fighting tongue cancer. I've spoken at length many, many times. There's a crack record about, my dad passing from the same cancer, and it's 6 years this year since we lost him, and it still doesn't seem fucking real. But we have saved lives because of this charity and because of James's shows and then, stuff that Emma's family's done outside to raise money for the charity as well. And it's just means so much to me, and I know that it means so much to James and of course Emma's family, and just come along, have a great night, everything in between. But more importantly, go follow Izzy on all of his links that are in the description below. They're all there. The link tree, the X profile, the YouTube profile. Hopefully his Facebook page will get restored at some point sooner than later. But go check him out. Go follow him. Go, if you're in the US and you're able to go to one of those 2 shows that I linked, go to them. If you're not able to go to them, have a listen to some of the other shows that he said and plan accordingly. But thank you to Izzy for coming on. Someone bring this man out to Australia. I don't know if I'll be able to even travel to meet him at this point with health and everything else. But just bring him out to Australia and let him experience this amazing country and the amazing talent that is in this country. But the song of the week this week was Holier Than Thou by Corey Taylor. The match of the week this week was Barrett Brown versus Gregory James, or Izzy James, in a dog collar match on March 25th, 2017. With that being said, I don't need to talk any longer. We've done really good at keeping the interview to an hour and keeping this whole episode to just over an hour. So I'm going to get out of here before I talk way too long and Nova Lee comes out here and has to get me with the dog collar. As a joke, I still think we should get one of those similar to MC Wormy and DJ Lulu with their shock collars, where if you say a certain word, it changes per episode. If you say a certain word during the episode, you get shocked. I'm just ranting at this point. But no, thank you to Izzy James for coming on. I really appreciated it. Would hopefully talk to him again in the future and dig deeper into certain topics. And hey, maybe you guys can let me know if there's any specific timeline you want to follow of Izzy James, or any specific matches you want to hear about from Izzy James, or just people and stories you'd like to hear about from Izzy James. I just before I recorded this outro, I just watched a video on his Instagram where he did the 6 songs thing that he mentioned towards the tail end, and it was him and EC3, and it was a really cool little quick video, and you actually learnt a lot about EC3 just in those quick couple of minutes. So go follow Izzy. He's doing some fun stuff. Obviously, he says he does some production stuff too, so hit him up and see what's on his plate and see if he's available. Give him some money for that. Who knows? But I am the essential John L. Crossfire. You were just caught in conversation, shaka-laka-laka, titty sprinkles, all the stuff and the things, and too much metal.